There's a strange illusion most people live with. They don't notice it because it feels like confidence, it feels like clarity, it feels like understanding. But in reality, it quietly limits how far they can think. And the most dangerous part is it doesn't feel like a problem, it feels like certainty. So instead of asking, am I right? They stop at, I feel right. And that small shift is where growth begins to slow down. Because the moment you stop questioning your own thinking, you start trusting it blindly, and the mind is very good at convincing itself. Here are 10 subtle behaviors that can quietly limit your intelligence without you even realizing it. Sign number one, you feel uncomfortable when things aren't clear. Ambiguity bothers you. You want quick answers, clear conclusions, a clean ending to every question. But reality rarely works that way. Most meaningful problems don't come with immediate clarity, they come with confusion, with incomplete information, with contradictions. And intelligence isn't about escaping that feeling, it's about staying with it. The people who grow the most are the ones who can sit inside uncertainty a little longer than others. They don't rush to conclusions just to feel in control again, because they understand something important. A fast answer isn't always a correct one. Sign number two, you rarely change your opinions, and at first, that can feel like strength, like stability, like conviction. But over time, something subtle begins to happen. Your beliefs stop being ideas and start becoming identity. And once that shift happens, questioning them becomes uncomfortable. Not because they're correct, but because they're familiar. So instead of testing your beliefs, you start protecting them. You look for information that agrees, you ignore what doesn't. And slowly, your thinking becomes less flexible. Not because you lack intelligence, but because you stopped challenging it. Sign number three, zero, believed something very simple. If you truly understand something, you should be able to explain it clearly, in the simplest way possible. Not impressively, not academically, just clearly enough that someone else can follow it. But many people do the opposite. They use complexity as a shield. They use difficult words, long explanations, and technical language to create the appearance of understanding, because complexity can hide confusion, but simplicity exposes it. If you can't break an idea down into something basic and understandable, there's a good chance you don't fully understand it yet. Sign number four, you listen, but only to respond, not to understand. While someone else is speaking, your mind is already forming your reply. You're waiting for your turn, looking for the moment to jump in, and because of that, you miss what's actually being said. Real listening requires something rare, internal silence, the ability to pause your own thoughts long enough to actually receive someone else's, because every conversation is an opportunity to update your thinking. But if you're always talking, that opportunity disappears. Sign number five, you prefer being right over being accurate, and those two things are not the same. Being right feels immediate, it feels satisfying, it gives you a sense of control. But accuracy is slower. It requires patience. It requires revision. Sometimes even admitting that you were completely wrong before. And that's uncomfortable. So the brain does something clever. It defends. It justifies. It explains away contradictions. Not because it's searching for truth, but because it's protecting your ego. And over time, that habit becomes invisible. Sign number six, you simplify people too quickly. You decide who they are within minutes. Smart. not smart, interesting, not worth your time. But people are not simple. They're layered, contradictory, changing, and the moment you reduce someone to a label, you stop learning from them because your brain believes it already understands them. And that assumption closes doors you didn't even notice were there. Sometimes, the most valuable insight you'll ever get comes from someone you almost ignored. Sign number 7. Curiosity has started to fade. You don't notice it happening. It doesn't feel like loss. It feels like efficiency. You stop asking deeper questions. You accept surface level answers because they're enough to move forward. But intelligence doesn't grow on the surface. It grows in depth, in asking one more question, in going one layer deeper. When most people stop, curiosity is what keeps the mind alive. And without it, thinking becomes repetitive, predictable, even if it still feels productive. Sign number 8. You avoid situations where you might look uninformed. You stay in spaces where you already feel competent, where you can speak confidently, where you don't have to struggle, and that feels safe. But growth doesn't happen there. It happens in unfamiliar territory, where you don't have the answers, where you have to ask basic questions, where you risk being seen as less capable before becoming more capable. If you always protect how you appear, you limit how much you can improve. Sign number 9. When something goes wrong, your first instinct is external, other people, circumstances, timing, and sometimes that's completely valid. But when it becomes your default response, you lose something important. The ability to reflect, to ask, what role did I play in this? Not to blame yourself, but to understand yourself, because without that reflection, patterns repeat. Different situations, same outcome, again and again, and it never feels like your fault. Sign number 10. You equate thinking fast with thinking well. Quick answers sound impressive. They feel sharp, decisive, confident, but speed is not intelligence. Depth is, and depth takes time. It requires slowing down, revisiting assumptions, looking at the same idea from multiple angles, sometimes even stepping away before returning with a clear mind. The best thinkers are not the fastest. They're the most thorough. And here's the part most people don't like to hear. None of these behaviors feel like weakness. They feel like strength. They feel like confidence. They feel like clarity, which is exactly why they're so difficult to notice, because the mind rarely questions what feels comfortable. So the real question isn't, do you have these traits? It's, are you willing to notice them? If you do, because the moment you start observing your own thinking instead of just trusting it blindly, that's where real intelligence begins to grow. Not in having all the answers, but in being willing to question them.